Can't believe 2021 is almost over. To help see out the old year, ring in the new year with Game 3 fast approaching, bring things all the way full circle, I'm going to show you guys an ancient build. It's an old build, but it definitely checks out. From Warhammer 1 back when I started playing multiplayer, this was one of my go-to anti-Empire builds, so let's talk about it. We've got Sarthrel the Ever-Watcher. One sort of recent addition is the Exalted Heroes on foot. Probably wouldn't have been like this in Warhammer 1, would have mixed them out for something else. Maybe some additional Forsaken, perhaps. I do have one Forsaken on each flank. Some chariots as well, Marauders, again, through the center. Plenty of Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes. The missile block chance and armor piercing damage with throwing axes is great here. And some doggos up against the Empire here. We've got Karl Franz and some Outriders with grenade launchers, a bunch of Spearmen and Flagellants, handguns as well, some Huntsmen mixed in here, Demigryph Knights with halberds, Royal Alto Griffites even, and of course some healing for all that expensive murder chicken power. So, gonna get the engagement started off here, just moving up with its massive wide disruption. Because I have so many melee units, it's going to be tricky for the Empire to respond to everything. So, like, I'm threatening with my horsemen on this flank here. They can even charge in, get at these handgunners. The chariots getting some good charges. Karl does counter back in here, gets nasty hits on those chariots. They're going to have to pull back and away. Marauders also getting absolutely destroyed there, which is just fine. A little bit of Shield of Thorns to give some physical resistance to the demis and to Karl. There's not really a lot that's going to do a lot of damage to them here anyway, but they'll basically take 0 damage, and I guess if the Marauder Horsemen were to come in, they could help deal with them. Chariots also facing some Demigryph Knights with halberds there, but out in the flanks, Forsaken, we're able to get into some Flagellants, but a little bit of friendly fire from those Outriders, definitely evening out that fight, but Forsaken able to clean out very effectively. This other flank also getting collapsed here, these Flagellants and Spearmen just getting ransacked by Forsaken and Exalted Hero. A little bit of Searing Doom going to be called down from Big Bird, of course. I don't actually have a Final Transmutation, just Searing Doom and Plague of Rust, which has been used on these Royal Alto Griffites here. While it's still active, we're going to hit them with Hounds. You believe it or not, the Hounds, because they have so many unit models with the armors debuffed of these like Demigryph Knights and other elite units, Hounds can move in and deal some pretty significant damage. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get a full swarm surround until the uptime is pretty much done. You can see it drops just there. But at the very least, keep them pinned in place and just hit them with a whole bunch of throwing axes. Throwing axes are definitely very strong AP missile cavalry. The chariots are also still online, coming back and wrecking these huntsmen here. Once again, Searing Doom just forcing those units to at the very least move or else stand and take that damage. Outriders, grenade launchers in particular, are quite squishy, so that was pretty good for me. Definitely don't want to take a heads-up engagement with Karl Franz, though, with Big Bird. He is in significant danger, so I'm going to pull away, try and screen out with some of these missile cav. This Exalted Hero had already got wrecked by old Karl, Mr. the Emperor. But anyway, the Poison Hounds coming in for more swarm. We're going to actually side turn them. A little bit of stand your ground from Karl, but Plague of Rust on him as well. Does put him down to 40 armor. Although Sarthrel does not have the armor piercing damage that Lords of Change will have in Game 3, that to Plague of Rust results in him basically not needing it, right? The Forsaken also move in here with their high weapon damage. We've also got the Exalted Hero, who, again, great weapon damage, non-AP, but still. All of that, plus the throwing axes, which are just straight-up armor-piercing damage, is resulting in Karl taking some pretty significant damage. No crazy burst yet, but at least like a quarter, now about a third of his HP in damage. The regrouped Exalted Hero does manage to catch the Jade Wizard, and again, momentary slip in micro results in multiple hits in a row from the Exalted Hero, which is enough to break him. The Empire guns are still standing, though, grenade launchers and the handguns trying to push back these Marauder Horsemen, but it's not enough to save Karl. All the throwing axes and the damage from these heroes is too much for him, even as the Demigryph Knights with halberds are able to push back my lord and these throwing axes. It was just enough to actually finish off Karl's leadership. And with the caster having just been beat up by the Exalted Hero, I believe he actually routs and shatters as well, which is going to lead to army losses. So a relatively quick one, but it was a favorite build of mine. If you go back and look at some of the first videos uploaded to this channel, they are of Warhammer 1 battles, right? Like, I started pretty late to the game in Warhammer 1 a few months, maybe, 4 or 5 months before the release of Total War Warhammer 2. So, you will see this build represented in some of those very early battles, and on, I think, the first battle I ever got featured on Turin's channel, I want to say is this build very similar to this. Again, I think you trade out the 2 Exalted Heroes for 2 more Forsaken at that time, but basically the same idea. Just super wide with lots of shock and a little bit of armor piercing, but also the ability to debuff armor significantly for good non-armor piercing troops to deal good damage. And the Emperor, my patron, coming in here, facing it valiantly. The build ended up just being a little bit too small for him at the end of the day. And I mean, hindsight's obviously 2020, but just having, like, maybe cut the regular demis for just some more Empire Knights and perhaps Pistoliers to help screen out some of my forces as well, probably could have done pretty decently. I mean, I wouldn't say this build's good that I'm using here. I wouldn't say it's ridiculously strong, but it's definitely fun. And the throwing axes are a big power component, so you do need to protect them. Again, the missile block chance helps against small arms fire from the Empire. A lot of people don't know or don't realize, but the throwing axes have shields, whereas the regular javelin and the horse masters both do not. So you get, at the cost of lower range and slightly more cost, over the regular horsemen. Again, shields plus armor piercing damage is really a great benefit in a lot of situations. So even though I have the armor sundering here, I think I would maybe mix in the weird spawn as well, perhaps in the old iteration of the build. That might have been sort of a different variation of it, but anyway. Chariots also come in, do some pretty good damage. If the Empire doesn't have enough volume of heavy cavalry, it can be tough for them to stop these chariots, and human infantry tends to be very light in mass, not quite as light as elves or like goblins or skinks, but pretty close. So chariots are very effective against them, and especially something like flagellants with literally 0 armor. Going to take a lot of shock damage from that, from the Forsaken, so ended up working out pretty well for me. The Emperor here, in terms of bright spots for his army, I do love the Outriders' grenade launchers. If used well, they're one of the strongest units on the Empire's roster. They're really tricky to use, though. I mean, top-level players tend to use them well. I don't use them often because I have hams for fists, and, you know, will definitely miss-micro them and get them horribly killed. But the Emperor did a pretty good job, just about paid for themselves, which is impressive, all things considered. So hopefully you guys enjoyed watching that one. If you do like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thank you once again for watching. Hope you have a wonderful day. Hope you had a wonderful year, and I hope next year is even better for you. Regardless, we'll see you next time.